Welcome to episode 114 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on March 27th, 2024. I have a travelog episode for you about my visit to Farnham, England to attend the Unravel Festival. What's it like? How do you get there? Should you get there? Let's talk about it all. I'm feeling good about things now and sort of like, I know I can do this. This is within my control. So I'm going to go ahead and share that I am doing a master's degree in creative event management. There, I have said it. It is out into the world. I didn't know that this degree even existed until a few years ago, but now that I'm over halfway through the first semester of the program, I can understand why it's wise to go through a degree program before setting about planning large experiences. I have been flying by the seat of my pants in planning some of the things I've done, and I have a lot of experience with planning small events due to volunteer and teaching positions that I've held. But larger scale events have so many moving parts that understanding how all of those parts function and impact one another really does matter. It's a part-time program through a British university, which means it will take 2 years to complete. And along the way, I will be creating and running a few events as part of the program, and just because I like doing them. But one of the other things I'll be doing as I go through the program is getting around to as many fiber festivals as I can to see how people are already doing things. I've already been to a lot, as you know, but there is a lot already going on in the fiber event space, and the literature and research being done on festivals largely ignores this niche. In the program, I'm reading a lot about music festivals and large-scale sporting events, and there's a lot of overlap when you're talking about the planning and organizational level of these events. But as far as what's being done for woolly folks and how we can do that better, I'm left to do my own research. To that end, I timed my last trip to Shetland so that as I returned home, I could go to Unravel in Farnham, England. Spoiler alert, I think it's one of the better fiber festivals I've been to. I'm going to tell you how I got there, what I saw, and my thoughts about whether you should make the trip yourself. So I landed in Heathrow and got a rental car. My flight arrived at 9:10 p.m. So by the time I got my bags and moved on from the airport, it was very dark, and I was going somewhere I didn't have any experience with, and I wanted to be able to have control over my personal safety. And this is why I opted to rent a car. However, if it wasn't for my safety concerns, the rental car would have been a total waste. Once I got to my hotel, which was just a 5-minute walk on very safe streets to the festival venue, the car just sat parked for the entire time I was there. Instead, had it been daylight, or if I were to return to the festival again, I would travel to Farnham by bus and by train. I would grab a bus at the airport to Woking Station, and from there I would get the train to Farnham. It would have saved me a lot of money. It would have been less polluting, and time-wise, the trip on public transport is actually very similar. If you factor in the time it took me to get the rental car, it would have actually been faster to use public transport. When you consider the costs of a rental car, you need to remember that oftentimes the rental car agency will want a sizable hold on your credit card for the duration of your rental, especially the big brand rental agency. So for me, that was £500 or about $700 just held unused that I didn't have access to during my stay. The rental itself for the 3 days was only about $100, and I had a hybrid and only used 2 gallons of gas the whole time. But gas is so expensive in the UK, it was about $15 to fill up the tank before returning it just for the 2 gallons. But still, not having access to $700 of space on my card while traveling for a $100 car rental was not something I was expecting. It was fine, but just be aware when renting vehicles, especially overseas, to find out what that hold amount will be and make sure you have enough on your card to cover that and have space for emergencies. So again, I would recommend just getting there using public transport. There are several hotels in the area. I stayed at the Bush Hotel, which was quite nice, good bed, good service, and as I said, it was only about a 5-minute walk to the venue. The venue is Farnham Maltings. This is now a community art space, but it began life as manufacturing buildings. Part of it started as a tannery, but the whole complex of buildings was bought and joined up together and used as a malting house for about 100 years, eventually closing down in the mid-1950s and then sitting vacant for several decades before the community decided to run it as a community center. Because of its history and how the buildings are all joined together in its previous life and then added to when it was reopened, there's a modern built area that you enter into, and then as you move into the older areas, you end up moving through lots of different levels because the floor of one building doesn't necessarily line up with the floor level of the adjacent connected building. It might sound like an accessibility nightmare, but the venue has done very well at providing ramps and wheelchair-friendly elevators for people who need them. It can be tricky to navigate spatially because of it being a collection of buildings, but the festival does a very good job of posting maps that orient you, that have all the areas clearly labeled, and there were a lot of staff and volunteers on hand to physically take you to the right classroom if you arrived for a class and were unsure about where to go. What this also means is that the marketplace for the event is rather sprawling and takes up most of the areas of the complex. Each of the 3 days I was there, I went through a different area of the marketplace. I thought I'd seen it all by the end of day 2, but I gave it one more look before I left on day 3, and I found 2 rooms with a total of maybe 7 vendors that I hadn't seen at all on the first 2 days. And I think this might be one area that the organizers could have done better with, was making it clear that there's more marketplace this way or more marketplace that way. I would have been disappointed to find out that I'd missed seeing those areas, but like I said, I did find them, but had I just been there for 2 days, I would have missed out on them. So they do offer classes. It's not an extensive range of classes, but there was a good variety of classes offered. On the first day, I had 2 classes I went to. The first was a circle loom weaving class with Emma Baker of Tabby and Tweed. She came with a variety of sizes of circle looms for us to pick from and all sorts of yarn and roving for us to play with. We got the looms warped up and she showed us how to get started and we were off. She came around and would show us a new weave pattern to try now and then so we could see the different effects of the weave pattern. We talked color along the way and how including a bright or a contrasting color can add visual interest to your piece. The class was only 2 hours, which was long enough to get us going and working confidently, and then we were away with enough supplies to finish our work at home. I did not work on mine any further while I was traveling because one of the things we were doing was using roving to create fluffy textures, and I knew if I did that and then packed the piece for transport, it was going to get all flattened out. So I have that now, and I need to get the weaving done, and it will live on the wall of my office along with the massive Dorset buttons I made a few years ago. I had some time to wander after that as my next class wasn't going to be until after lunch. There's 2 cafe spaces on the premises, and they were moving people along fairly quickly. I would say the lines looked to be maybe 20 minutes long at their longest. I had been traveling all day the day before and hadn't gotten to bed until midnight, so I actually walked back into town and got a grab-and-go type lunch at the grocery store and went back to my hotel room and ate it and had a nap. So let's pause here. You can imagine me holed up in my hotel room having a little snooze, and we'll have a song. I'll come back and tell you about the rest of the festival. I found this song the other day, and it's a special sort of ode to the aging singer-songwriter. I hope you've had the experience of seeing a performer in person who has been at it their whole life. It's a beautiful thing to witness. This is Brad Howard with He's Got Heart.
Sometimes he sings a little out of key. He's not the greatest player of guitars. Well, his hair is gray and he's looking frail and weak, but he's got heart. His wife, she passed away in 93, so he drinks to keep the pain from hitting hard. But he's living out the songs that he sings. So he's got heart. He may not wear a suit of fancy colors. His face is wrinkled from years of pain. But all that stuff just never seems to matter when he gets up on the stage. With every song you can feel his soul and completely see the story he imparts. And he'll have you hanging on to every note, 'cause he's got heart. He may not wear a suit of fancy colors. His face is wrinkled from the years of pain. But all that stuff just never seems to matter when he gets up on the stage. He used to try to get a record deal, but he gave that up 'cause it just seemed too hard. But of all the ones I've heard, I'd choose him, 'cause he's got heart. Well, he's got heart. He's got heart.
Okay, I went back for the afternoon where I had my first class with Sylvia Watts-Cherry. You might be familiar with her work already. She's the designer of the Nubian Queen sweater, and recently she was a part of the Journal of Scottish Yarns with her Highland Coo sweater. She designs beautiful intarsia patterns and teaches classes in it. If you've been listening for a while, you know I have a love-hate thing with intarsia. The majority of the sweaters my mom knit me for a good 5 years of my life were acrylic intarsia sweaters from the Mary Maxim catalog. Intarsia didn't go away, but it did fall dramatically out of style for a long while, but it has been making a comeback in recent years. I had had 4 classes before this time with 2 different teachers, and I understood what I was doing after the last 2 classes, but I knit a few things that didn't use the technique, and when I went back to it, I didn't really enjoy it. But when Unravel opened their classes for the event, there wasn't another class in particular slots that really appealed to me, so I thought, okay, let's do intarsia one more time and see if I actually enjoy it. And I did. I will say that is in large part because of Sylvia herself. She's informative and positive. She provided clear handouts. She did great work getting around to all of us and checking in. If you can get into one of her classes at an event, you absolutely should. The class that first day was on intarsia in the flat. And the next day I had a class with her again to learn intarsia in the round. And again, fantastic teacher. I found myself honestly enjoying the process. The class in the round was designed to knit a mini sock, but I talked to her as I left the class the day before about whether it would be okay to just do it as a wrist warmer, because many of you know how I am one of the knitting oddballs of the world who doesn't enjoy knitting socks. And I was told that wasn't a problem, so I went ahead and worked it as a cuff instead. Again, really enjoyed the class with Sylvia. Highly, highly recommend her as a teacher. I also had my 4th class was a class on choosing colors, and it was good. I picked up a few things I hadn't heard before. I'm happy I took the class. I'm not going to name the teacher because I really don't want to call her out specifically because what I'm about to say is something I see a lot and I think is a general issue that needs to be changed in the knitting class arena. For those of you who teach things that you've learned from other teachers, especially those who are teaching something that you learned directly from another teacher who came up with the technique, or from teachers in a localized area that are trying to keep their local knitting techniques alive, please name those teachers. The person teaching this class had clearly been to Shetland a few times and had lessons from the teachers there as part of her own education about choosing colors and colorwork knitting. And I know this because there were a few times when she said things like, when I went to Shetland, I learned, or there's a woman teaching a class in Shetland about this, and then showed a method so specific to that teacher that I've heard teachers in Shetland say, that's Terry's method. I learned that from her. And so I started piping up with things like, yeah, that's Terry Laura's method. Or yes, I had a lesson like that in Shetland too. It's what so-and-so teaches. Teachers, please keep in mind that I'm saying this as someone who has now had 6 classes in Intarsia from 3 different teachers and has had countless numbers of classes about choosing colors. You are not competing with the other teachers out there. Knitters take multiple classes about the same thing from different teachers. You all put your own spin on things. But just like if you were writing an academic paper and wanted to cite someone else's work or thinking, you really should name them. There are very few of us who are coming up with original ideas, and that's fine. But taking the time to name the people you learned from is the right thing to do, especially when it's a technique that specific person developed, like in the case of Stacking Stitches by Zandy Peters, or if it's a technique that is still bound to a specific location and the people of that location are trying to keep the craft alive there, like the knitters of Shetland. Please just add their names to your class notes so you can give them the credit they deserve. It does not take away from your authority as the teacher of the class to point to those who taught you, and doing so helps keep heritage crafts moving and innovation coming, because we create an environment that values those skills. Okay, so off that soapbox and immediately on to another. Should you make the trip to Unravel at Farnham Maltings? The reason why I shared with you the topic that I'm doing my master's degree in is because my argument for whether you should go to Unravel really has a lot to do with things that I've been studying in my event management program. One of the main takeaways from this initial course is that events are one of the most polluting industries in the world. A lot of events are really focusing on ways to improve their pollution ratings by doing things like eliminating swag bags, switching to recyclables in any way that that's possible, and ensuring that their trash is managed as cleanly as possible. They're incorporating power sources that are renewable. They're offsetting their carbon emissions through various programs. All of that is being studied and refined and developed. But the biggest input into the pollution problem around an event is the pollution created by getting everything and everyone to the event. Transport to the event generally accounts for 60%, sometimes up to 80% of the pollution linked to an event. I don't think this means you should never travel to a fiber festival event, but I do think that as festival participants, we should be thoughtful about which events we travel to. And for me right now, I'm going to be intensifying the amount of travel I'm doing to events because, again, I want to see what's being done in the fiber event space as part of my education. But after my degree program is over, my thoughts about whether I go to an event or not is going to be decided by whether I can easily get to the event from my home without needing to fly, or if it's an event that I can add on to a trip I'm already having to make, or is it an event that is specific and unique to the area and the area's heritage craft tradition? So in other words, is the history and legacy of the craft part of the festival? So when I offer my opinion now about whether you should travel to Unravel or not, I'm not just considering the quality of the event, but whether what they offer is somehow unique to the area and the area's heritage crafts. That said, I think the Unravel at Farnham Maltings is one of the better festivals I've been to, that the organizers did a great job. The marketplace had a fantastic blend of vendors that included quite a few local yarn producers in the mix. I think maybe they could add a few more classes in for participants. I did hear other people say that, so I know that's not just me. All of that said, if you are local to Farnham or are within a few hours train journey, I wholeheartedly endorse this as a really well-run fiber festival in the south of England. If you are coming from farther away than that, though, I don't think I'd recommend the trip. While the festival is set in a lovely town and the venue is great and the marketplace was grand, there wasn't anything about Unravel that was unique to the area. There was nothing about the local fibercraft traditions of the region. There were some local yarn producers, but they all had online shops. A lot of the teachers traveled to festivals around the country and the world, and nearly all of them were teaching topics that a lot of other teachers are teaching too. You likely have a fiber festival happening nearer to you that also has a great marketplace and great teachers that you can get to with less effort. True and honest kudos to the organizers. I even sent them a note on Instagram afterward to let them know how well I thought they did with the event. It really is well done. And I hope that Unravel continues to thrive. And I know that most of the people I interact with were local or relatively local. And it was a packed event. So I suspect it will continue in excellence into the future. I just wouldn't recommend this as a festival for your bucket list if you are a fiber crafter from afar. That's all. One more song for you today. When I look for music for the show, I almost always choose music with singers, but this song, I love this song, and the lead singer is the guitar. Enjoy this instrumental number from Luigi Bellanova. This is Welcome Alice, and I'll see you on the other side. A few more things before I go. If you are happening to be looking into traveling to a bucket list craft location this year, there are still a few spots available on this year's Macking Our Way Through Shetland tours. Check those out through the link in the show notes. It has been a couple months now of having the ads attached to the episodes. Thank you for your kind acceptance of that change. So far, those ads are earning enough to cover about half the costs of the podcast. So I do thank you for your patience with them. Another way to support both the podcast and the yarn producers and creatives of Shetland is by purchasing this year's Shetland Hogmanay Box. I am in the final stages of planning for the boxes, so I don't have a price settled yet. What I can tell you about this year's mystery yarn box is that it will once again be a 31-day box starting on December 1st to take us through the month to New Year's Eve, also known as Hogmanay in Scotland. The box will again be jumper weight wool that will be worked into a gender-neutral, size-free accessory that will have options for you to customize it. The yarn will all be 25-gram balls, and there will be 24 balls of yarn this time, with 7 days for the pattern and gifts. Some of the gift providers are new to the box this year, and those returning to the box are offering different items. This year, I will be providing a limited version of the pattern fairly early on in the box, so you can get it on your needles if you want. This will be done in a way that doesn't spoil the upcoming colors in the box, so it will stay a mystery box to the end of the month when you will get the complete copy of the pattern that will have photos of a couple of the customizations that you can do with the pattern and a QR code to download a digital copy if you prefer to use Knit Companion or another app to track your knitting. Last year, I did 40 boxes each of 2 different colorways. This year, I have some more time constraints I'm dealing with, and Terry Laura is returning as the designer and has her own time constraints this year. So we are simplifying things a little bit. We will be doing 1 colorway and only 60 boxes total. The project this year is a completely different take than last year's. While all the yarn will go into the same project, the way the colors work together is very different. I am unsure when I'll get another episode out, so to stay up to date with information about this, please follow me on Instagram as I Thought I Knew How, join the I Thought I Knew How Facebook group, or hop over to ithoughtIknewhow.com and scroll down a bit to enter your email address in this space to join the mailing list. Likewise, the planning for the Stitch and Pitch event on August 17th, 2024 is continuing. At this point, I think that the Shetland Hogmanay Box info will go out first. But to stay on top of info as it's available, please follow me on social media and get on the mailing list. Okay, I have 1 more week of spring break, and I have high hopes of getting another episode out during that time while I can. Cross your fingers for me, folks. I hope to be back in your ears soon. In the meantime, thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. The show notes are where you will find links to the things mentioned in the show, so be sure to check those out. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on X, where it's just Thought I Knew How. The groups on various platforms are all called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.